Welcome back to our Journey with Jesus Bible study, where we're going through the Bible chronologically within a year using Terry Lee Cobble's the Bible Recap Study Plan. Today we are on day 26, going through Genesis 41 through 42. And as I mentioned yesterday, we see Joseph 2 whole years of him being in prison after he had interpreted the cupbearer's dream. And so he had been forgotten about for 2 whole years in that prison. In the meantime, we see the keeper of the prison still having favor on him and allowing him to be over whatever it is that he needed to be over. Whether it be, I don't know if it was finances or the prison, the prisoners themselves. Yeah, he was in charge of all the prisoners, which is a pretty big deal, like we see that consistently being the theme, that whether he was in his father's home, his father kind of put him over his brothers, which led to the issues. When he was in Potiphar's home, Potiphar put him over all of his belongings, or, like over his house. Whenever he was in prison, the keeper put him there. And then we will see that because of Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dream and him showing himself to be an honest man, Pharaoh puts him over everything. He is only second in command over Egypt, which is amazing. And so some of the things that I wanted to point out, we only had 2 chapters today, chapter 41 and 42. They were fairly long, but I kind of wanted to point out God's sovereignty here, that he would not have even been in a position to interpret Pharaoh's dream had everything not happened to him, had his brothers not betrayed him, had the Midianites not found him in the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites, had Potiphar not purchased him. What if it was someone else that had purchased him and not Potiphar? And then the evilness of his wife who sent him to prison, who then made him able to interpret the baker and the cupbearer's dreams, that was then able to tell Pharaoh what his dreams meant. And then we see all of that happening and it going back to Joseph, the dream that God gave Joseph in the beginning, and just God's sovereignty and how he used the wickedness of his brothers, the wickedness of Potiphar's wife, even the wickedness of the cupbearer. What if, like when I say wickedness, the forgetfulness, because what if the cupbearer would have told Pharaoh immediately? What would have happened with Joseph? He would have not been in a position to where he's kind of like, hey, this person interpreted my dream. And so I think we can learn a lesson about that, to where God's hand is in our lives all the way through. We just have to look for it. We have to see where, we have to have eyes to see and ears to hear. And we have to pray for that. And we have to pray for the wisdom and discernment for God to show us. Show me, Lord. Show me where you have had mercy and grace. Show me all of these things. And I just think it's pretty amazing whenever you look at the story and look how God used someone's humanness or the things that they meant. And we'll see Joseph say, what you meant to harm me, God used for good. And so that's it, right? That's kind of the whole thing. So anyway, that's off my soapbox. I did want to point out the fact that in the 2 dreams, 7 was repeated 3 times. And because of a recent study that I've done, I pay a lot of attention to 7. And so I researched a little bit that when 7 is repeated 3 times, so 7, there were 7 cows, and then there were 7 other cows that were ugly, and then there were 7 attractive cows. And so, let's see. We just see that when 7, sorry, I got distracted. I was trying to read, making sure that I was correct. When 7 is repeated 3 times, it shows God's completeness, or his complete perfection, and his divine order. Like we will say, like in Genesis, we see, I don't think it was Revelation. We see holy, holy, holy. When things are repeated 3 times, that's something within the Bible that things, repetition matters. And then when 3 is a divine number, 3 is completion, 7 is completion and perfection and divine order. And so it makes it a little bit deeper whenever you see that God is in the details and things that he's trying to say. All right. And so another thing was in chapter 41, verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. It just made me think about how we have to clean up to go before God. And they even had to clean up to go before their royalty. And so how much more do we have, did they have to do that back then? We don't, because Jesus, we don't have to clean ourselves up before we go to them. But in those times and before, we even see at Mount Sinai that Moses tells them that God tells Moses to tell the Israelites that they need to wash their garments. They need to cleanse themselves before they come before him. And it just makes you wonder if it was not so much about not being clean coming before God, but because that was their practice back then to show the reverence and the royalty of that at that time. And then, so Joseph in verse 16, he constantly points to God. He said, it's not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. And so we just continually see his character portrayed here. And then we see that because of Joseph's integrity and character, he rises to power in Pharaoh's, with Pharaoh. And then he has children. Firstborn is named Manasseh. And he said, because God has made me forget all my hardships and all my father's house. So this is him forgetting all of his past and looking more to the future. And then Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. I'm forgiving. The Lord has made me fruitful. And so he is accepting where he's at. And then we see in chapter 42, Joseph's brothers come, and they don't bring Benjamin. We just see so many different things that Joseph does here. One of the things that I wanted to say that in one of the commentaries and videos that I watched, that it was the famine that drove his brothers to Joseph. How often is it that it's our own famine that drives us to Jesus? That he allows these things to happen to us to drive us to him, because he's already orchestrated things for him to bring us out of the pit. And I just really, and Joseph, we see here, he refuses to allow his brothers to even pay for the grain or the bread. And we see the same thing mirrored in Jesus, that there's nothing that we can do. There's nothing that we can do to earn his love. He is the bread of life. He is what sustains us, and there's nothing we can do to earn that. And so I just saw all of that kind of mirrored here in Genesis 42. That is all that I have. We see Reuben kind of stepping up, and anyway, we just see a lot of character coming out in here. So I'm running out of time, but come back tomorrow and we will go over Genesis 43 and 45. Have a good day.